Terribly. Streaming live, this is Tracking the Tropics.
Good Thursday morning, everyone. Good Thursday morning, Tampa Bay. Storm Team 8 meteorologist Amanda Hawley here with an update from the National Hurricane Center on Hurricane Dorian. It is still a Category 1 hurricane as of 5 a.m. The 5 a.m. advisory, winds at 85 miles per hour sustained. You can see here on satellite as I put it into motion, it's not looking quite as impressive like a normal Category 1 hurricane would, at least over the past couple of hours. It kind of had a dry slot make its way into the southern side of the storm. That means dry air kind of moved into the center of the storm, not really weakening the storm because the winds have stayed sustained at 85 miles per hour, but the overall organization has lessened just a bit, which doesn't really affect the long term. In the near term, it will have to re-strengthen just a bit before it starts to gain wind speed strength over the next 12 hours or so. But long term, no major changes with the 5 a.m. advisory here. We are still looking at a major Category 3 hurricane potentially making landfall along the Florida East Coast sometime late this weekend. The most notable change with this advisory is that we are seeing a slower pace of this track. So it seems that they think Dorian will slow down heading into the next 5 days, meaning it will stay over open water, that warm water, longer, which could mean a stronger storm making landfall. That's something that we'll have to continue to work out over the next couple of days. But for now, the storm is going to move into a very favorable environment for strengthening. We're still looking at a little bit of wind shear here, but very weak. It shouldn't impede the storm very much at all. We're still looking at the forecast for a major hurricane by tomorrow early afternoon, a major Category 3 hurricane with winds of 115 miles per hour by 2 p.m. on Friday. Again, in that very favorable environment in the northeastern Bahamas. As we advance this just a little bit more, again, no major changes since yesterday, since last night, with the exception of slowing down just a bit. We're still looking at a major Category 3 hurricane now sitting off the Florida East Coast at about 2 a.m. Monday morning with winds of 125 miles per hour. And then you can see that cone still extends along the entire east coast of Florida, meaning the center of the storm could still go anywhere within that cone. We could still be looking at a Miami landfall. We could still be looking at Jacksonville or maybe even into southeast Georgia landfall. That's something that we just can't pinpoint at this time. We still have very low confidence in that track forecast, even in the intensity forecast, as you guys know and have seen over the past couple of years in hurricane season, that the intensity of the hurricane is just very hard to predict. There's usually a category of error when we're talking about 5 days out. So maybe one category higher, maybe one category lower. Something we're going to continue to keep an eye on here. But nonetheless, this is still 5 days out. We've still got 4 days or so of model runs to come in for this track to kind of wobble to the north and wobble to the south just a little bit, and for those impacts to really come into clearer detail heading into the weekend. But with the slower time frame means you have more time to get prepared. But still, we're still looking at 4 days out from now. So still plenty of time to watch this thing and see where it goes for us here in Tampa Bay. Regardless, though, if this storm makes landfall as a major Category 3 hurricane along the Florida East Coast, we are still looking at potential impacts here in Tampa Bay. We could still be seeing hurricane force winds here in Tampa Bay, depending on exactly where this storm makes landfall. You can see at the end of the track, it is still expected to be a Category 1 hurricane over land there somewhere along the Florida peninsula. So again, we could still be looking at some impacts here in Tampa Bay. It would not be the same impacts, though, that the East Coast is looking at. Just want to be clear. We are expecting some impacts depending on where the storm goes, but not the same impacts as the East Coast. Again, want to be clear with that, but here are the forecast models that everyone likes to see. We have high confidence over the next 48 hours. That tight cluster of lines gives us good confidence, and we've seen that over the past couple of runs. So again, we're still expecting it to continue northwest towards the Bahamas. And then it's going to take a more westerly turn as high pressure kind of nudges in, and I'll show that in just a second. But after that, like we've been talking about, the models kind of diverge there, and that gives us low confidence. And since the size of Dorian is relatively small compared to other hurricanes, exactly where this storm makes landfall will really depend on the impacts that certain people see along the East Coast and here along the West Coast as well. It's a little smaller of a storm. Right now, hurricane force winds only extend out 15 miles from the center of the storm. So that's not very far at all. Now, if the storm grows a little bit, we'll be talking about a different story. But for now, the storm remains relatively small, and those impacts won't be very far reaching. But again, something we're going to continue to keep an eye on and see if that changes. After the weekend, after Monday, Tuesday timeframe, Dorian will turn north. And like we always say, when will it turn north? That's always the big question, and it always depends on that location of the Bermuda High that we talk about. So it will take a turn to the north, and we could be looking at a rainfall event somewhere in the southeast United States, because if this storm slows down a bit, it will have the potential to dump a lot of rain, which is something that we do not need here in Tampa Bay. We have seen too much rainfall so far this summer, and we've kind of been talking about that over the past couple of months as well, with the depressions opening up in Pasco County. We've seen a lot of rainfall. The ground is saturated. Rivers have been in flood stage for a while, so not a lot of rain will cause those rivers to go back into flood stage. But I do want to kind of explain the steering currents here just a little bit to give you guys an idea of what us meteorologists are looking at right now and what we're kind of deciphering between, and why the models just don't have a good handle on this storm over the weekend. So we have that Bermuda High that sits in the Atlantic, a little closer to home, but it doesn't always sit in the exact same spot, and it's not always the same strength as well. But that high, the position and strength, is usually what we see and what we look at for those waves coming off the coast of Africa. It usually steers those waves towards the United States, and exactly where that high is positioned and how strong it is usually determines where that storm will go. And that's exactly the case with this system as well, with Dorian. We also have an upper level low pressure sitting over Cuba right now. And Dorian, over the next couple of days, is going to kind of move in between those two systems. So that high pressure and the upper level low going to kind of move right in between them. Those two systems kind of pushing it towards the state of Florida at the moment. But the high pressure is actually going to get a little stronger, nudge a little closer to the southeast United States as well. And that high pressure acts as a blocker that Dorian cannot move into that high pressure. So the stronger the high pressure and the closer it is to the United States, it will take a more southerly track. So the strength and the position will be key over the next couple of days, and you can see that here on that explainer. A stronger high pressure, again, will push the storm a little further to the south. A weaker high pressure will allow the storm to go a little further to the north. So that's kind of what we're deciding between at this moment, and models are doing both. Different models have different solutions. They have different solutions with that high pressure, which means they have different endpoints for the for Hurricane Dorian here. So something, again, going to continue to hash out here over the next few days and give you guys updates. For now, though, the likelihood of Tampa Bay seeing at least tropical storm force winds, that would be 40 miles per hour or greater, is growing. We're at a medium chance right now to see at least those tropical storm force winds, again, 40 miles per hour or higher. But again, that chance could grow, and it will likely grow over the next 24 hours. Those colors will get a little darker. They'll move a little closer across the center of the state. And hopefully we'll get some more confidence, too, in the track. Those lines will tighten up a bit here in the coming days. But the last graphic that I want to show you is the potential arrival time of those tropical storm force winds, because regardless of where you are in the state, when those tropical storm force winds arrive, you'll want to have your preparations complete because, again, that's 40-mile-per-hour winds. You don't want to be outside in that. So I know the time is hard to see there, but along the east coast of Florida, you'll want to have those preparations complete probably by Saturday evening. If you're on the west coast of Florida, probably by Sunday morning, Sunday midday would be the best time to have those complete. But again, still plenty of time for folks along the west coast here in Tampa Bay. You guys, continue to pay attention to the models, continue to pay attention. We have updates coming for you every 3 hours here on Tracking the Tropics, and we're going to, give you guys every single model run that we get in as well. But for now, it's just too hard to determine what exact impacts we're going to see. So, I'll kind of read through some of your comments. I'm sure that, some of you guys are asking about specific locations, and we just don't know yet. We just don't have specific impacts for specific locations just yet. But either way, I appreciate all of you guys joining us. We have over 3,000 viewers on Facebook Live right now, and I want to answer some of your questions if you have them. I know a lot of people talking always about the European model, right? The European does a fine job with tropical systems most of the time, but not all of the time. And actually last year, it actually did pretty poorly with the intensity forecast. So it just goes to show that we can't look at one model at any single time. We have to look at that consistency from run to run. We have to look at consistency between those models. And both of those things combined give us a higher confidence. So, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you guys to, have a full tank of gas, because if you think about it, the East Coast is going to be impacted, and some of those people from the East Coast are probably going to be moving towards us here in the West Coast if they decide to evacuate. Some of them, not all of them, but if we have a higher population over here, people evacuating, you'll just want to have your supplies on hand as well. But again, different impacts expected for the East Coast compared to the West Coast, but the confidence is growing that we'll at least see some sort of impact, even if it's just in the form of increased rain chances for Labor Day and maybe into Tuesday as well. I'll put up that track forecast for you once again so you can see the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Again, not many changes if you're just joining us. This is the 5 a.m. advisory, the 5 a.m. track, if you will, from the National Hurricane Center. And the only thing that has really changed as of this morning is the timing of Dorian. That National Hurricane Center has this slowing down just a bit before it makes landfall, which, again, not the best case scenario for the landfall, because the longer it sits over those warm waters, the low shear environment, the moist environment, the longer it has to kind of strengthen. So we could be looking at potentially a stronger system, potentially making landfall along the East Coast. But again, lots of error here, day 4 and 5 out. That is Monday and Tuesday. So the line just before the east coast of Florida there, that's 2 a.m. Monday with potential winds of 125 miles per hour. And then moving onshore, staying a Category 1, possibly through early Tuesday morning. So a slower moving system is the most notable update for now. But that was all kind of the updates that I wanted to give you. I know we still have a lot of viewers. I'll kind of try and go through some of your questions as well. We have plenty of people joining us. Thank you again for joining us. Again, not many changes. I know yesterday we woke up to quite a few changes, so many people probably waking up today thinking, what's going on this morning? But we don't have a lot of changes, which is not a bad thing. No changes mean a little more confidence, but again, models still kind of split as we get towards Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, which will obviously be key for the state of Florida and for folks along the East Coast. So just trying to see some of your questions here. A lot of people saying, you guys are joining us from other locations looking too. I don't want to rule out a Georgia landfall here that, we saw a couple runs from the GFS yesterday showing a more northerly track, and some of our spaghetti models, our forecast models, if you will, still take it on a more northerly track. The European kept it a little further south. So we're going to keep an eye on both of those and just see how they kind of converge over the next couple of days. So let's see. Connie says you're watching from Pennsylvania. You have daughters and family that live in Fort Myers, family in Cape Coral, Tampa, Newport Richey. So worried. They are on the Gulf side. Will that make a difference? Yes, Connie, it will make a difference. We're going to see different impacts than the folks along the East Coast will. The major hurricane impacts will likely be felt along the East Coast, with potential hurricane impacts felt here along the West Coast, depending on how long it takes to move over the state. If it takes a slower time to traverse the peninsula of Florida, it will weaken a little bit more before it, possibly traverses somewhere in the Tampa Bay area. But again, the timing there will be key. I do think that we will see some sort of impact at this point. We have higher confidence that we are going to see some sort of impact here in the Tampa Bay, but it will not be the same impact as the East Coast will be felt. I did just get a couple of tweets from the National Hurricane Center. The next regularly scheduled update coming from on Dorian will be at 11 a.m. And no watches or warnings are currently in effect for Dorian. So there will not be an 8 a.m. intermediate advisory. I was wondering kind of why we didn't see that 8 a.m. and intermediate advisory come up. But again, it's not going to impact land in the next 48 hours. So we are not seeing any watches or warnings being into effect. So those watches and warnings go in effect 48 hours in advance. So again, nothing in effect for the state of Florida just yet. Jenny asking how strong will winds be along the West Coast right now. As the forecast stands, a major Category 3 hurricane, potentially making landfall along the East Coast with 125 mile per hour winds, potentially higher gusts. That is the current forecast, but again, can't pinpoint location there. Amanda says, St. Augustine Beach, you're watching from What Are the Changes? Updates, you're just joining. Again, we don't have many updates this morning waking up to, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. We are talking about still a Category 1 Hurricane Dorian sitting in the western Atlantic, now north of the Caribbean islands. Winds still sustained at 85 miles per hour. I do think that if you are north of the storm where it makes landfall, you're going to see some more impacts than if you were to be to the south, because we'll have those onshore winds. That's where we'll be looking at the storm surge effects as well. Again, this will be along the east coast of Florida. And I do believe the moon right now is in a phase to where our tides will be a little bit higher as well coming into the weekend. So that's something to take into account if you live along the east coast. Higher than normal tides affected by the moon, as well as the storm surge on top of that. Something to think about. Alice is joining us from West Virginia. Saran says, what about South Carolina? Again, not necessarily out of the question, but chances are coming down for impacts in South Carolina. Justice is joining us from Lakeland. We've got Kimberly joining us from Lakeland as well. Gilbert says you are from Belgrande. Again, lots of people joining us, still over 2,000 viewers here. Lots of people interested in Hurricane Dorian this morning, still a Category 1 hurricane. Alice says you have two sisters in Florida, Clearwater and Gainesville. Again, if you're along the west coast of Florida, Clearwater, or even inland, you're not going to see the same impacts that the east coast will, but still impacts certainly possible, especially I would say if you are north of at this point. Again, it's just too hard to say. I don't even want to say it because I don't want to guess for you guys, because it's just, that's all it would be really, is a guess. And 2 days from now, things are going to be different. I said that 2 days ago on Tracking the Tropics. We are going to see changes, and we certainly have seen those changes here over the past 24 to 48 hours. Deanna's joining us from Homosassa. I was just up there doing some scalloping. Yes, changes are coming, though, in the coming days. Unfortunately, this is timing just awfully with Labor Day weekend, but the timing here slowing down a little bit. Just again, that is the latest from the National Hurricane Center, the 5 a.m. update. The most notable change is that the storm may be slowing down a bit, so that would give us a longer time to potentially prepare. I know a lot of people on vacation too. I've had several people text me and say, I'm going to Sanibel or I'm going to the Keys this weekend. It's a vacation weekend, right? I know a lot of people trying to get out of town, but unfortunately, it's just bad timing with this one. If you are leaving town and still want to leave town, just make sure you have everything in place before you go ahead and do so. Sherry says, good point here. Highlands County here, I see the spaghetti strings going over us. Again, that is something, and I'll put those on. That's my next little slide here for you guys. I know a lot of people want to look at those. Yeah, there are some spaghetti strings, if you will, that do go right over the Tampa Bay area. But again, each one of these, I just want to be clear with you, each one of these are different models. Each model takes something different into account. That's why we get different scenarios. And when all of these models are in a tight cluster, that's when we have a lot of agreement. But after this, and I explained it at the beginning of the stream here, we just have a divergence really in the models. The models are just saying, well, it could do this if this happens, or it could do this if this and this happens. If that high pressure out in the Atlantic is a little stronger, it'll probably go a little further to the south. That high pressure blocks it just a little bit more. So we just don't know yet. That's why we say don't pay attention to one specific model. You know, everyone likes the European model, but you just can't at this point. It's just too far out to speculate and too far out to put all your coins into one basket, into one model. Tiffany says, I live in Kissimmee, St. Cloud. Should I evacuate? There are no evacuations in order right now. And inland, we would likely not evacuate anyway. Evacuations are posted for storm surge effects only along the coast. If you feel comfortable in your house and you're not under an evacuation, you should feel comfortable in your house. You shouldn't feel the need to evacuate if you feel that the structure of your house, can withstand stronger wind speeds. That is how evacuations kind of go. We post evacuations for storm surge and the water potentially moving in. We always say run from the water, hide from the wind. You can't escape the water once it comes in. So that's why we would evacuate and post those evacuations. But again, no evacuation orders are in effect at this point. Just, again, reading some of your comments here. Vonda says, I have family in Jacksonville, my son and daughter-in-law, and a new grandbaby on the way. Jacksonville will likely see some impacts from this storm. Again, if it takes a more southerly track, it may see some lesser impacts, but I do think that we are still going to see some sort of impact along the first coast there, just because of the way the storm is positioned. It will be moving pretty much due west at that point, is the current thinking, and that means that we're going to see winds moving onshore on the north side of the storm, so we're going to see those storm surge effects. Rob said, did I limit out on scallops? Unfortunately, no, we did not limit out, but we did do much better than a lot of the other folks this year than we have seen, so maybe we just hit the sweet spot up there. But again, changes are coming to all of our rivers along the west coast of Florida. Christine says, is it bad if a hurricane slows down? Great question here. And again, the current forecast does have it being a little slower than previous thinking. If the hurricane slows down, because the conditions of the Western Atlantic are pretty much perfect for strengthening, in this case, yes, it is not a great scenario if Dorian were to slow down, because it will sit in those favorable conditions and it will suck up some of that warmer water, which is the fuel for the hurricane. So if it slows down, it could be a little bit stronger. And again, the National Hurricane Center stressing the error in both the intensity and the track forecast for days 4 and 5. So that would be Monday and into Tuesday. The track forecast, away from the center of that cone there, we could be looking at 150 to 200 miles away from the center of that cone. That's why the cone is there. But the intensity forecast could be a category above or a category lower. So maybe a category 4, category 2. Right now they're thinking category 3, 125 miles per hour sustained winds off the coast of Florida early Monday morning. Kimberly says, if this is going east, will the Gulf Coast get anything like Sarasota, Tampa area? I think maybe you meant west. If the storm continues west through maybe the Tampa Bay area, we will likely see some impacts. They will be different impacts, though, than the east coast of Florida. Brittany says, do you think that there will be school on Tuesday? Again, we don't issue any of that. That will be up to the school districts. And obviously, again, that depends on the timing of the storm. If it speeds up a little bit, the storm could be out of here by Tuesday. If it slows down, we could still be looking at Dorian over us on Tuesday. Dennis says, go to Home Depot and get whatever you need. They have tons there. That's good to know. I know we have all of our reporters out and about today, scoping out where some supplies are at. Again, now is not a bad time to double check your hurricane kits because, of course, it's been hurricane season. You should have all of that ready to go. But I would make sure you have everything in your kit ready to go just in case you have to use it and put your hurricane plan into place. Vonda says, again, I wish you could let me know what the impact would be in Jacksonville. I'm a worried parent in Mississippi, and there's probably a lot of worried folks out there just in general, right? We have a major hurricane potentially impacting the southeast United States. That's a big deal, especially with the previous hurricane seasons. We've seen some major hurricanes do some damage. So, worried is understandable, but right now it's just too early to talk about specific impacts. And if you are prepared, if you have your supplies, if you have your shutters up on your windows when the time comes to do so, there's really nothing more that you can do. If you've done all that you can do, there's nothing more to do. So you shouldn't feel worried. If you're the most prepared that you can be, there's nothing to worry about because you couldn't do anything more. Tammy says, run from the water, hide from the wind. Good info. Yes, I agree, Tammy. Bucky says, what about Bushnell? Again, it's too early to talk about specific areas, specific neighborhoods, specific streets, and talking about specific impacts. Tiffany again says, thank you, but will Kissimmee or St. Cloud have a Cat 1 or a Cat 3? And again, we just don't know yet. If the storm is moving at a little bit of a faster pace, it will hold that strength a little bit longer. But if it's moving slower, it'll weaken as it moves west across the state. Sharon says, our power outage is expected in the Clearwater area. Again, we don't know yet. Think about the saturated grounds, though. Grounds are wet. We've seen a lot of rainfall here in the past 3 months. So, if you have weaker trees that are around your property, a little bit of wind, maybe not Category 3 wind here on the east coast of Florida, but a little bit of wind. It may not take a lot of wind to topple some trees onto power lines and things like that. So not saying that we're going to see power outages in the Clearwater area or in the Tampa Bay area, but you got to think about all the factors into play. Again, we've had a lot of rainfall. The ground is saturated, so keep that in mind. Good morning, Dakota. Crystal says, Naples, Fort Myers, we are going to get some rain. Likely rain chances are increasing this weekend as Dorian moves closer. But again, too early to say how much rain, too early to talk about what kind of wind speeds we are going to see. David says, what if it enters the Gulf and then shoots north? Which, again, one of our models was showing that yesterday. It's not out of the question. And if that case happens, then that would not be a great scenario, right? The Gulf waters are very, very warm, and the conditions in the Gulf would likely be favorable for development again. So if it moved across the state of Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico, we would likely see some sort of re-strengthening. And if it were to go north, we would see potentially another landfall. Not out of the question, but we just don't know yet. That's too far out to speculate. We can't even figure out landfall at this point. We can't pinpoint landfall, so that is just too early to say. And again, that was just one run of one model. It's not showing that anymore, so we will keep an eye on it though. Jean says, in Sarasota, do you think we will have to cover our windows? Too early to talk about that yet. When we know a little bit better of where it will make landfall and how fast it will move across the state, then we'll get a little bit better of an idea of if, we'll need to board up windows here along the East Coast. Lynn says, flights Monday into Clearwater. Again, it will depend on the timing of the storm. Right now, the current forecast track has it sitting over the state on Monday, so we could be looking at flight cancellations. It's not out of the question. I think that we posted an article yesterday about certain airlines waiving some fees, so you might want to check into that on WFLA.com to see if your airline might waive your fee for you if you need to cancel or postpone your flight. If I go back, I do want to put the cone back on here for you guys again. If you're just joining us, this is the 5 a.m. advisory, the latest cone from the National Hurricane Center, as it is going to continue to move northwest into the Atlantic, into a favorable environment for strengthening, and we're talking about a major Category 3 hurricane by early Friday afternoon, and then potentially making landfall sometime late this weekend, early Labor Day, maybe early Monday morning. Jonathan says, what kind of wind in Sarasota can we expect? Again, just too early to talk about at this time. But I would, again, double check your hurricane kits and make sure they're prepared. And then when we give you the go ahead to start, making the motions of putting that plan into place along the East Coast, we will do that, and you guys can go ahead and follow suit. Erica says, stay safe from Holiday, Florida. Thanks, Erica. And I think that goes for everyone. Stay safe. Don't panic. Be prepared. Patricia says that you're scared. Hurricane Irma hit us 2 years ago. You're so scared. You pray for all to be safe. Completely agree. This is a little different situation than Irma, but also a little bit similar in the fact that, we just don't know when it will make that turn to the north, right? Irma, we sat for days and days, watched the forecast models come in, when will it make the turn? When will it make the turn to the north? It finally did, and it all depended on that high pressure in the Atlantic, in the central Atlantic, and how strong and the exact position of that Bermuda high, and that's the same kind of scenario that we're looking at here with Dorian. Stronger high pressure will keep the center of Dorian a little further south, and we could be looking at a southeast Florida landfall. A weaker high pressure, we could be looking at more of a east coast of Florida landfall, somewhere along the Space Coast, maybe the First Coast, but anywhere along the east coast of Florida is not out of the woods just yet, because we have to continue to get more confidence in our models before we say it is going to make landfall here. So just not yet. And Lynn, again, flights Monday. We have an article on our website, WFLA.com, showing you what airlines are waiving fees for cancellations or changes. But right now, with the timing a little uncertain as well, the timing keeps speeding up and slowing down a little bit. We just don't know whether flights will be canceled. And again, that's not up to us. That's up to the airline. So make sure if you have flights, make sure you're following their updates as well. Barbara says, where do I find out what we need in our hurricane kit? That's a great question. There's a lot of great resources online, Barbara. But the main important things that you'll want in your hurricane kit are important documents, and make sure they're waterproof in some way, whether they're in a gallon Ziploc baggie or they're laminated, but have a way of keeping those with you in case flooding were to occur. You wouldn't want those articles, those papers to get damaged. You'll want to have water for yourself and for every member in your household, as well as your pets. Don't forget about the pets, right? For at least 3 days, if not a little longer. Have food, non-perishable food items for yourself and your family, as well as your pets, for at least 3 days, just in case that power goes out. But again, there's a lot of great resources online to where you can I just do a quick Google search, right, of what you need in your hurricane kit. And I believe we did a couple stories yesterday as well on what items are good to have in your hurricane kit. So go to WFLA.com and do a quick search for hurricane kit. And I'm sure a bunch of different articles will come up for you, and it'll give you exactly what you need. Flashlights are good. Batteries are good. Portable chargers are good for your phone. If power goes out, you can always watch us on your phone, right? We're doing Facebook Live updates constantly, and we are constantly updating you guys as well. We'll have, live streaming of our newscast, but if your power goes out, you won't have TV. So you want to have some sort of portable charger for your phone, whether that is, they have cranking chargers, which are really cool because that's just manual power. So that's always a good thing to have. Candles are not good. I do want to reiterate that because if they get knocked over, they could cause fires and things like that. So flashlights are a better way to go. Michelle says, Dorian, go away, not your weekend to visit. Shoo. I agree. There have been a couple of funny memes on Facebook scrolling through about go away, Dorian, right? Point the fans. Again, just reading through some of your comments, just want to make sure you guys are, not panicking and you're just prepared over the next few days. Just giving you guys the latest information, and every update from the National Hurricane Center will be on here. We'll get another full update, which will include a new track at 11 a.m. For now, this is the 5 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center, and we did not get an 8 a.m. update because we do not have hurricane watches or warnings or tropical storm watches or warnings in effect for anyone at this point. It's just turning in the Atlantic, not bothering anyone at this point. Car chargers help too. I use that, says Sandy. Good idea. Just make sure you have gas in your car. Again, I talked a little bit earlier about how some of the folks from the East Coast, if they're asked to evacuate or not, they may be coming to the West Coast over here. So some of our supplies may be limited in that manner. So make sure, even though we may not be feeling the direct impact from the direct landfall, we could still be using up our resources on this coast. Anne Marie, that's a good question. Does anyone know where in Haines City my friends can find bottled water? A lot of places are sold out. I know we have reporters out and about today checking on supplies and giving you guys the latest. And of course, we'll have all of the latest on our newscast coming up. We're still in show right now. We'll have another newscast coming up at 11. And of course, we have First at 4, starting at 4 p.m. Kristen says, thankfully, my boyfriend has lived here his whole life and is overly prepared always, so his girls are safe. That's awesome. We love to hear that. And unfortunately, a lot of folks have moved to Florida within the past couple of years, and they've never been through a hurricane. A lot of people have moved here just since Irma has moved through, and they just don't know what to expect. And it's kind of scary if you move from, North Dakota or somewhere up north that has never had to worry about a hurricane or something like that. So it's a little bit different of a scenario for a lot of folks, and some folks are probably worried. But right now, no need to panic. There's really never a time to panic. I said it earlier. If you are prepared as you can be, then there's nothing else that you can do. Billy says, after this one, is there another one? There is no new development expected after these storms. No new development expected over the next 5 days. We were talking about Erin. Erin is no longer. It is post-tropical, is continuing to move to the north, was never a threat to land anyway. So that is good news. We're not tracking anything else in the tropics at this time. Cody says, do we expect it to stall over us? There is some concern that Dorian could slow down a little bit and make a slower path as it turns north at some point, in which case it would dump a lot more rainfall again, which we don't need, and we kind of talked about that already. So there is a potential for it to slow down a little bit and maybe not slow down until it reaches Georgia or somewhere in the southeast United States. But again, just too early to talk about, but rainfall will be a big concern heading into Labor Day weekend, the end of Labor Day weekend, Monday and Tuesday there. David says, a lot of us in the Panhandle are curious about what to expect if it hits the Gulf and goes north. Should it gain strength in those waters? If it were to play out that scenario, if it were to make its way all the way across the peninsula and sit in the Gulf of Mexico, there is a chance it would re-strengthen before it heads north. So certainly keep an eye on that. But you can see the cone here only goes out to Tuesday morning for a reason, because after that there's even more uncertainty. The cone is 400 miles wide to the north and to the south. That last line there is 400 miles long because the center of the storm could be anywhere within that. That's the average error that the National Hurricane Center gets, taking into account all the past past hurricanes and our spaghetti models that we're looking at right now. So again, too early to tell. 5 days out is a lot anyway. Steven says, thank you, Amanda, for your report. Hopefully you'll have time to get your home in order. I appreciate that, Steven. Yes, we are starting to ramp up our coverage here at WFLA. We want to give you guys the latest as often as possible, especially here on WFLA Now. So we are going to continue to do that with every 3-hour updates. I'm going to sign off. I know we have a lot of viewers, but please join me again coming up at 11 a.m. Again, we'll get a full update for you guys coming up at 11 a.m. with the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We'll get a wind speed update, we'll get a position update, and a track update with some of the newer model runs. So join me then. I have to go prepare for that now, starting to make some of those graphics. But for now, again, no major changes before I sign off here. The latest from the National Hurricane Center, no major changes with the 5 a.m. update. The most notable change here is that it has slowed down just a bit. So you can see there on the last bit of the track, we're not expecting landfall until early Labor Day morning, early Monday morning. So something that could still change and will likely still change, but we are going to watch it. That's all we can do at this point. And you guys should continue to check in, continue to double check those hurricane kits and your hurricane plans, and be ready to put those into place when we say to do so. For now, I'm going to sign off. Again, 11 a.m. I will be back with the very latest. So join me then. For now, get ready for potential impacts from Hurricane Dorian, both on the West Coast and the East Coast. But I will see you guys back here right at 11 a.m.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.